Hello, and welcome to the 10th Jerusalem Writers Festival in Mishkanot Sha'ananim. My name is Neta Halperin. I'm a journalist and a literary critic at Haaretz newspaper, and I'm so happy, honored, and humbled to interview one of the greatest authors alive, Mr. Julian Barnes. Mr. Barnes wrote 30 novels, 4 crime novels under the name Dan Kavana, 9 nonfiction books, essays, memoirs, etc., and 3 collections of short stories. 15 of his books were translated to Hebrew. Mr. Barnes won many awards and honors, including the 2011 Booker Prize for his novel A Sense of an Ending, and he is also the most recent laureate of the Jerusalem Prize, which is awarded by the Mayor of Jerusalem as part of the Jerusalem International Book Forum. Mr. Barnes, what a great pleasure, and thank you so much for this conversation.
It's very nice to be here. Very nice to talk to you. I'm only sorry I can't be there in person.
So I find you in your study, I assume?
Yes, you do indeed, yes. As you can see, it's painted a sort of Chinese yellow, which my study has been repainted several times over the last 30 years I've lived in this house, always the same color.
Always the same color?
Yes, because it looks as if the sun is shining. Probably to you, it looks as if the sun is shining in on my study. It isn't, it's cloudy today.
Really?
But it means that when I walk into my study in the morning, I always think, oh, it's a sunny day. Yes, good. I'm in a cheerful mood. It's very straightforward, and I just fool myself every day.
It's lovely.
Well, I recommend it to other writers.
Definitely, definitely.
It would make some of the pessimists more cheerful.
So you need a cheerful mood in order to sit in front of the desk and stare at the page?
I think you need to clear your mind of anxieties, the daily anxieties of waking up and reading the newspaper. And
definitely.
Then thinking, oh dear, I'm stuck on my book. What shall I do now? And I come in here, and it's a sort of drug-free high just to sit here.
And it's also something very quiet and calm about it.
Yes, I think that's because I'm on the street. I'm looking out over a couple of prunus trees, the tops of them, but it's not a street that many cars go down. So fortunately, there aren't any. The houses are always being sold and done up, but fortunately, they're not working on a Friday.
Oh, wow.
So it is a very calm environment, yes.
That's super important. So how would you describe your daily routine? Do you write every day for the same amount of time, or do you write only when you are inspired?
I will try and
drink whiskey every day at 3.
I'll try and tell you the truth, because most writers lie about the way they work. Most of them say, oh, well, I get up at 7, I have a run, I come back, I read a little Tolstoy, and then whatever, and then I work until midnight.
Sounds very devoted.
I can't do that because I've never been able to do that. I wake up fairly slowly. And so I wouldn't get to my desk normally until about 10 or 10:30. And I would hope to be able to work through till about 12:30 or 1. I find that the morning is always good for original composition. And then the late afternoons, sort of 4 to 6, are quite good for revision. That's just how it's worked over the years. I wrote one book, actually, which was my longest book. It's called Arthur and George, and it's a kind of detective story about race and Englishness. And funnily enough, with that one, I found that I could write almost straight through the day. I'd come back after lunch expecting to revise, and I thought, no. There was something about, books have a different feel to them, and there was something about that book which said, come on, get on with it, tell me the plot, what's happening next? And I just obeyed it. But no,
you were intrigued by the plot that you were creating.
Yes, I suppose I was. But it was very strange. It was like not an otherworldly force, but it was like something that I wasn't entirely in control of. telling me, you know, I want to hear more. Tell me this, get on with the story. I want to know what happens next. That sort of thing.
Wow, that sounds fantastic.
Well, if only it happened with every book, I would have written more books, but then you probably think I've written quite enough already.
Well, you've certainly written many, and you and I also want to congratulate you because you have a new book coming out in 2 weeks.
Yes, I do. Yes,
Elizabeth Finch.
Elizabeth Finch. Yes, yes.
Congratulations! So exciting.
Thank you. It's. I mean, I hope it will be interesting. It's a mixture of fiction and non-fiction, which is often what I've done in the past. And it's about a wise English woman who teaches students a course called Culture and Civilization. And the non-fiction strand is about my namesake, Julian the Apostate, who was the last pagan emperor of Rome. Wow. After him, all the emperors were. I mean, they'd been Christian before. And he reversed that, and he was the last pagan emperor, and a very wise man, and killed after 18 months in the Persian desert. At which point Christianity never looked back. And some say, some wise people, including Voltaire, say that was the point at which Western civilization went wrong. So it's an interesting theme.
A turning point.
A turning point, yes, yes.
Wow. So what triggered, what evoked the idea to write this book?
Well, the character of the woman who inspires the narrator, a certain sort of English woman, and also the fact that the Julian the Apostate side comes from the fact that for about 10 years, maybe longer, I've had in my head a line from the English 19th century poet Swinburne, which is about the defeat of Julian the Apostate in 363, something like that. And it goes like this: "Thou hast conquered, O pale Galilean." And these are supposed to be the dying words of Julian the Apostate. He's meant to throw, a Persian spear hit him in the side. He's meant to have thrown a handful of blood into the air while exchanging, "Thou hast conquered, O pale Galilean." The pale Galilean being Jesus Christ, of course. And it's supposed to be. But of course, this is entirely apocryphal. We know that this story, that those famous last words, as they often are, were made up after his death, a couple of decades after his death. But it's just the thought that history could have gone in a different direction. You know, he was only emperor for 18 months, as I said, and if he could have been there for 20, 25 years, I mean, it's worth considering, you know, how European Western history would have been different. It would have been perhaps more tolerant. I think monotheisms are, on the whole, a disruptive and a regrettable thing. The great joy and strength of paganism was that you didn't bow to a single god. You had lots of gods to choose from. There was a supermarket of gods, and you had the ones which suited you best. And also, we must remember, when the Romans started conquering other parts of the world, they didn't say, as subsequent conquerors did, "We are bringing you a new religion, which you will obey." They say, they got there and they said, "Well, you've got to obey Rome now, but, you know, you've got your gods, we've got our gods. You might want to worship our gods because obviously our gods are a bit stronger than your gods because we just beat you in battle." But they didn't say there is only one truth, there is only one religious truth. And I think that would have helped the world over the last 2,000 years.
Tremendously.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting because the question of could have history turn in another way is also a question of the way it's also related to the question of memory and how do we treat the past, how do we look back, and how we reinterpreting the past, which is a question that you are dealing with in your recent books.
Yes,
I think.
yes. Both the personal past and the historical past. The great 19th century French philosopher and historian Ernest Renan said, getting its history wrong is part of being a nation. And I think that's a brilliant remark. He doesn't just say getting its history wrong is part of becoming a nation, because we all know that every nation has an origin myth, which it sort of burnishes and takes out and holds up to the people saying, this is how we began. Mm-hmm. We know that every country has that. But what he's saying is something, I think, subtler and more profound, that in order to continue being a nation, you have to go on deceiving yourselves about what sort of a nation you are, and that this myth has to be burnished constantly. And so that's that on the macro level. And then I think on the micro level, in our own lives, we reinterpret what happened to us, who we are, how we've behaved. We have our origin myth of how we became who we are. I don't just mean who your parents were, but how we created ourselves. You know, we go on fooling ourselves or deceiving ourselves in a kindly way. You know, we aren't brutal to ourselves, but you know, we just continue to get things wrong. I mean, and that's where memory comes in, obviously. And I've become, as I got older, I've become more interested in memory and its fallacies. About, when was it, 10 years ago? No, 13 years ago, I published a book called Nothing to Be Frightened Of, which it's a mixture, it's a sort of family memoir, but it's also about death. I knew that my brother, who is a philosopher by trade, he lives in France, and I like to say he's an ancient philosopher in both senses of the word, but he is, and he's very intelligent. He's much cleverer than I am. I knew that we would have to have some exchanges about our childhood. And so I emailed him and I said, look, I'm writing this book and I'd like to ask you some questions, and it's about what to do with, you know, our early memories and things like that. And to my astonishment and joy, he wrote back saying, yes, of course, I'm quite happy to remember things as I do, but I have to tell you that I greatly distrust memory as a form, as a historical record, and that if our memories don't coincide, go with yours, not mine, because yours is probably better than mine. And I thought,
take your version.
No, that's incredibly generous, and so I did, but I think as the years since then have progressed, I've become less certain of my memories and less certain of their truth. You know, I had this image, which I think many of us carry, that a memory is a kind of, you know, something happens and you remember it, and it's like, you know, going to a safe deposit box or something like that, or a left luggage office at the station, and you put it there. And then when you need it, when you need to remember this thing, you go there and you take it out. And it's just the same as it was when you put it in.
Waiting for you.
Waiting for you. And of course, it isn't really like that. And that every time we take a memory out and we repeat it, we're always slightly altering it. And so, you know, people's favorite stories about their lives are, I think, the least reliable. I think perhaps the most reliable are the ones that you only take out occasionally, or you know.
Or you don't like to remember them, or
well, or they're not sort of daily necessities to us. I mean, I'm waiting for that stage, and as you get older, apparently a lot of your early memories come back, ones that you had forgotten or mislaid. I view that with slightly mixed feelings, because there will be new memories which don't agree with the memories that I've been working on and using for the last 60 years or so. But I do. I mean, my brother said 13 or 14 years ago, I think that memory is much closer to an act of the imagination than we tend to believe. And now I'm sure that that's true. I'm sure that that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the other thing is that, I mean, I was thinking, for example, about my my grandparents the other day. I only had one set of grandparents, my mother's parents, and I was thinking, in whose minds do they still exist? And mainly, they still exist, the memory of them exists in my head and in my brother's head. But when I have talked to him, and of course, our memories of them are completely fixed now. There's no way of changing them. They died when I was about sort of 15 or 16. And my grandfather, who had fought in the First World War, was a school teacher, and I found him very fierce and stern. He had a bristly moustache and he used Brill cream on his hair, and I found it a bit terrifying. Whereas his wife was a very gentle and, to my mind, very interesting woman who was brought up as a Methodist. Then became a socialist and lost her religion, then became a communist. Then when Russia and China split in the 50s, was it, or 60s, she chose the Chinese. This is a woman,
very surprising.
She was brought up in Shropshire, which is in the sort of Midlands on the Welsh borders, and she lived, she'd never been abroad in her entire life, which was normal. And she married my father, and she'd had one daughter, and she chose to be a Chinese communist. And actually, I like this very much because she used to get a magazine sent direct from China every month called China Reconstructs,
Wow.
and it had wonderful stamps on. And I was a stamp collector, and I thought she made the right decisions because Chinese stamps are really interesting. Anyway, that's by the by. My brother, so that's how I remember my grandparents. My brother, on the other hand, remembers my grandfather with great affection because he was the first child, and so my grandfather took a lot of interest in him, and he taught him things. He taught him woodwork and practical things like that. And I think I always sensed that he was the favorite grandchild.
The favorite, definitely.
Whereas my brother thought that our grandmother was a sort of boring little woman who was always in the kitchen. And these two versions of her are of our grandparents are completely incompatible. And so the truth is unfindable now. And this is not an unusual experience, but it did strike me very hard when I continued it, when I sort of started thinking about it. And yet we jog along with these memories, sure that they're 100% objectively true.
We can't do otherwise. I think.
I think we can't do otherwise. But you know, that's the going back to the history point. You know, getting your history wrong is part of being a person, as well as part of being a nation, and and so on.
Suddenly, it seems
but of course, sorry to interrupt, but of course that's very good territory for a novelist.
Definitely,
the novelist exists on contradictory stories and viewpoints.
Well, I do remember I watched you. I found an interview which just a minute, I found it. Sorry.
Right. Was it on YouTube or was it on
yes,
a print interview?
It was on YouTube with Clive James.
Oh God!
As a part of Talking in the Library.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
a fascinating series, and it was a fascinating talk.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, and you said there, and I quote, as a novelist, you are always being sort of grounded to the human factor, which is what the novel is always about. So there is something, well, also now when you describe a nation, you describe it in a very human manner. You know, it's blind spots, it's constant need to tell itself a story, and being aware that to the blind spot. So I think for you the human factor is everywhere.
Yes,
whether you write about the nation, people.
I think that's correct. Yes, I mean I'm not a philosopher. My brother does the philosophy in our family, and he's welcome to it. But all characters have. Most characters in my novels have ideas. They have thoughts. They try to generalize about the world, and sometimes they succeed successfully, and sometimes they don't get it right. But I think that's how I've always operated. I've always operated at the human level, and indeed, the novel that's just coming out is a very good example of that. That it's partly about how ideas that are given to you and proposed to you by a charismatic woman lecturer, how they go off in your head, whether they explode in your head, whether they don't, and what long-term effects they have. Julian the Apostate, I'm sorry to go on about my next book, which you haven't been able to read, but...
No, it's so fascinating.
Julian the Apostate, like most Roman emperors, when they went on military campaign, took with him a whole lot of soothsayers and astrologers and augurers, and he was constantly stopping. And, you know, they'd kill a few animals and look at their entrails, and then they'd look up at the night sky, and then they'd do some other form of divination in order to decide whether to progress the next day and attack. And there was one thing which I came across which struck me deeply, which was that there was a great lightning storm one day. And I came across this phrase which the interpreters of signs use, which is an advisory thunderbolt. So all of a sudden, this huge thunderbolt comes down from the sky, and it's telling Julian, you know, something that the interpreters can then interpret. Is saying, you know, march on, or don't go over the river, or whatever. An advisory thunderbolt. And I thought that this, again, taking it back to the human level, there are things sometimes which you're taught or which you hear, and it strikes you like an advisory thunderbolt. And then you think, oh, I better not cross that river.
Yes. I better listen to this.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's extremely. And sometimes, of course, you know, as Freud said, sometimes a cigar is only a cigar. Sometimes a thunderbolt is only a piece of weather. So sometimes it's not advisory. It's a non-advisory thunderbolt.
Non-advisory thunderbolt, definitely.
I did get very distracted by the idea of how to read the signs.
But sometimes your characters, if we speak about the way we remember things and the human factors, sometimes there is a moment of acknowledgement and pain. Let's say, for example, in the only story, Paul, your book from 2018, which I like dearly, and Paul, the protagonist, and the storytellers. He reminds us that memory is always partial. It's always his side. It's not linear. It's not a document. It doesn't work like that. But this is your only guide to your emotional past, and this is a very painful reminder sometimes.
Yes, yeah, that's true. And sometimes I wrote 2 novels which have The Sense of an Ending and The Only Story. They have slightly similar male narrators who don't quite understand what has happened. And then at the end of the book, and when they're already too late to do anything about it, they discover some truth about their lives and the falseness of their memory. And I remember the early one, The Sense of an Ending. It was about a man who was always cautious and always chose the safe option if possible. Both emotionally and in terms of his work and so on. And then at the end, after decades have gone past, he discovers something which makes him realize that playing safe and trying not to get too hurt or too involved is actually just as dangerous a stratagem for life as plunging in and taking a risk. And of course, what the news that then comes back to bite him at the end of the novel is something he can't do anything about. And so he's filled not just with regret, which many of us will have towards the end of our lives, but also remorse. And remorse is a much stronger and more deadly emotion. It comes from, the morse part is from biting etymologically, so it's biting again. So it's something from your past that comes back not just as a sort of, calm and gentle regret, but as something that is biting you in the leg, and then will come back and bite you again.
Yeah.
And I remember being very touched. I got quite a few responses from people who are of about 20 or something like that to this novel. And they said, I read your novel and it made me think I'm not going to live my life carefully.
Really?
I was terribly touched by that. And of course, at the same time, I felt a bit responsible. I mean, what if they go and do some crazy thing which they later regret? It's like there's a section on love in my novel History of the World in 10.5 chapters. There's a half chapter about love, and several couples have come up to me at readings and events, and they've said, we had a paragraph of that read at our wedding, or we're going to have a paragraph read at our wedding. Is that okay? And I felt, I felt pride on the one hand, and then I also felt, can I take the responsibility of this? So I would say, yes, I'm very happy for you to read that out, but it's not. Nothing will be my fault. It's up to you two. It's up to you two to be happy and to love one another. And I hope you do.
Don't let this half paragraph affect you.
And I'm afraid that none of those couples has written back to me since and said, by the way, it worked out, or it didn't work out. But you send your books out into the world, and you send the ideas they contain out into the world. And
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, but and also if you mention those two books together, those two novels, A Sense of an Ending and The Only Story, there is also a great deal not under the surface. There is also really a great deal of dealing with masculinity. What is to be a man at that period, or in general, to take risk, or to live really cautiously, and the hopelessness that comes after it. This is.
And if I knew the answer to how a man should live, then I wouldn't be writing novels about it still in my 70s.
And it's true that in an interview for Haaretz, you said that The Only Story sort of grew out of A Sense of an Ending because there is this relationship there, a young man and a woman who's older than him, his mother's girlfriend. And you told my colleague, Gili Yazakovich, that after several years, you decided to turn your attention to this relationship and started wondering about it. And also, well, I haven't read Elizabeth Finch, but there is also there a relationship between the speaker, which is an inspirational woman, and also her former student who reopens her notebooks year after and wonder or rereads her life. I'm not sure, but I'm curious to know. I'm intrigued to know, are those three books connected to each other in a way?
Well, I think
thematically, emotionally, dealing with love, death, aging, memory.
Yes, I think the first two are quite closely connected. I think the third one is also in its way a love story, but it's a platonic love story. You know, it's about a man in his 30s who's drifting, a sort of out of work actor who grows tomatoes and things like that, mushrooms actually, and is looking, as often some people are in their 30s when the first phase of their life hasn't gone as they expect, and is looking to become more serious, I suppose you could say, and also to have some background of knowledge and learning. And so he goes on this evening course at an extension college of London University, and he discovers this inspirational figure called Elizabeth Finch, who is in her early 50s when she takes the class. And after he's graduated, they stay in touch and they have regular lunches. And and then she dies, and then he inherits all her notebooks and library. And slowly he is able to say, yes, of course I loved her. Yes, I loved her. Wasn't a usual love. And we never went to bed together. We never kissed. We touched hands once or twice, and that was it. It might not be obvious to readers in the way that it is that the two previous novels are, but they're all love stories in the way. You know, I mean, love and death, that's what we deal in, don't we? That's what our job is.
Definitely. Literary critics and journalists often tend to divide your writing into two leading divisions, let's say. The first, which is expressed within Flaubert Parrot, your highly acclaimed book from 1984, or Arthur and George, or A Noise of Time, just a few examples, and other are kinds of a mixture of prose and biography and philosophy and cultural and literary criticism, while the second division composed of, for example, A Sense of an Ending and The Only Story that we have already mentioned, but also other books like Before She Met Me from 1982 or Talking It Over from 1991. They are more intimate and they focus more directly on a relationship and emotions. Do you agree with this division? Do you feel comfortable with this description?
The simple answer is I hate looking back at my books.
Really?
Yes, I hate looking back. Well, I don't mean I hate my books. I don't mean that I look back at Flaubert's Parrot and I think, you bastard, why did you write that? I think I look back at Flaubert's Parrot and I'm incredibly grateful to it because it was the first book of mine which really took off like a parrot and which was also translated. It flew into other countries. But I find it unhelpful to try and work out what kind of a writer I am and whether how one book relates to another. The only way I find I can write a book is by forgetting my previous books, by not thinking about them. If I was assailed by the thought that well, you did something a bit similar 5 books ago, it wouldn't work. I mean, when I first became a writer, when I started writing my very first books, I always thought you must, it's a rather macabre way of expressing it, you must write as if everyone else is dead. You must write as if your parents are dead. You mustn't think about what they might say, how they might react. You must think that all other writers who are living at the moment, they're dead as well. So, you know, it's not a competition and so on and so forth. And what that is was just an attempt to clear your mind. There's just you and the text and the reader, and that's all that matters. And then after you've written a few books, and people start saying, "Oh well, yes, this reminds me of that," and he's been on this theme before. When they start saying stuff like that, I don't want to know. I have a very good friend who's a French professor at the École Normale Supérieure who writes about me, and she knows more about my works than I do. And if I occasionally, I will send her an email which says something like, you know those sunglasses which were fashionable a while ago where they had mirrors? I mean, I'm sure they're still fashionable amongst bad people, but have I ever had a scene with someone wearing mirror sunglasses before? I'll email her this, and there's another guy in America, and they consult, and they say, no, you've never used that. So
that's fantastic. You have like a box of memories.
Yes,
available.
Yes. I've got it. Of course, we hope that their memories are also correct. But what was I saying? So in order to write, say, Elizabeth Finch, my current novel, I do all the usual wiping out, but I also wipe out what I've written before. It just wouldn't be helpful. And then, you know, there's that dreadful word oeuvre, which people say. I hate it. I haven't got an oeuvre. No, I just write one book at a time. And I don't know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing, but I don't, in terms of, you know, a career path as a novelist, have any idea where I'm going. It would be boring if I did. You know, you want to do something different each time, and you want to go into new territory, and you hope you don't repeat yourself. And maybe if next time I write I mean, going back, my French professor has written several books about me, and I haven't read any of them.
Really?
Yes, and this is a good deal. She understands my point of view completely, and she says, no, it's quite all right if you don't read my books, because I would find links between them. I'd find thematic repetitions and so on and so forth, which I think would sort of undermine me rather than strengthen me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if other writers are like that. It might just be a neuroticism, but it's one that this is necessary to me as a writer.
Yeah, you protect yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Definitely. And you feel comfortable in front of a blank page time after time.
Oh, yes, I feel more than comfortable. I feel excited.
Really?
Yes. I know I'm very lucky in this regard, because every so often when I'm writing a new book, I think this is the best thing there is to do, you know, or it's the best thing there is for me to do. And I have the same excitement. I don't feel. I remember my old friend Ian McEwan, who also won the Jerusalem Prize 10 years ago, I think. I remember he wrote an article once that says, which was saying, in a slightly mournful tone, this thing about sitting down to writing a novel, and you think, oh, I've got to go through all that work again. I've got to go through all that drudgery. I've got to go through all that angst.
Oh, wow.
And this is obviously his way of preparing for writing a novel.
Yeah. He has to suffer for a while.
Yes, he has to suffer. And he has to think, why I've written 17 novels, or however many it is. Is the 18th going to make any difference to me or to the world? And that's his way of dealing with it. My way of dealing with it is slightly more optimistic and thinking, oh, good, you know, I'm going on a new adventure.
Wow.
And the reader, I hope, will come on it with me, you know. So that's why maybe it's to do with my yellow walls that, you know.
Yeah.
I just they cheer me up. Yes.
It's all coming together. It's all connected.
Yes, everything is connected. Yes.
Tell me, I'm really intrigued. I feel maybe it's only me as your avid reader that in recent years your writing has changed a bit. I think it's more minimalistic. It's more pure, almost crystalline. Do you feel the same? Do you feel that there is a change? Is there a difference in your approach to deleting? Something is more.
Well, I think as you get older, you either get shorter or you get longer in terms of what you write. You know, and I answer you with a slight sense of queasiness because I don't like thinking along these lines, but it's true that my last 3 novels are all quite compact. And I think it's because I feel I can do more by saying less. Mm-hmm. When the great composer Verdi was in old age, and he had a wonderful old age, writing several masterpieces, even in his 80s. He said, I learnt to write fewer notes, which is kind of wonderful because you don't think of composers like that. You think they write as many notes as they need to, and how are they counting? But I thought that's very, very wise remark. And I suppose I think I know better where I'm going than when I was younger. and so I don't know if I'll. Well, actually, the last book was a non-fiction book about a French 19th century French gynecologist. It's called Dr. Potsy, and it was called The Man in the Red Coat. That was, I think, longer than my novels, my recent novels, but I'm not sure because it's got lots of pictures in. So it's got more
Hard
pages,
to calculate, yeah.
but it's got a lot of pictures. Yes.
And tell me, well, throughout the 1980s, you wrote a series of crime novels under the pseudonym of Dan Kavanagh, featuring Duffy, a bisexual private detective with a phobia of ticking watches and a penchant for Tupperware. Why did you choose to use a pen name? That's my first question.
Well, the answer to the first question is, I took 7 years to write my first novel under my own name, which was called Metroland. And then I wrote a crime novel in approximately 12 days.
Really?
Yes. It almost came out of my wife was a literary agent, and she had a very good South African crime novelist called James McClure. He came to supper, and he said, that he once wrote a book in 5 weeks or 3 weeks. I can't remember what it was. And I thought, God, that's amazing. It took me 7 years to write my first novel. And then in the middle of the night, I woke up and said, 3 weeks? I bet I can beat that. So I went away with an idea in my head. And I wrote it in about 10 to 12 days, the first crime novel. And then I was faced with a predicament because I didn't know if I would take 7 years to write my next novel, or whether my next crime novel would take 3 years. I had no notion of how it was going to be. And there was such an extremity between these two pieces of work that I thought, and I think it's traditional for straight novelists, as we're called, to take a different name when they write crime fiction. And I chose Kavanagh as the surname because that was my wife's name, so it's a little tribute to her. And as it turned out, I wrote 4 altogether, and the longest took me about, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks. This is the funny thing. I got to a stage where, readers assumed I wrote crime fiction in order to finance my non-crime novels. And I realized that actually I was writing novels like Flaubert's Parrot in order to finance my crime novels. It was just kind of back to front. And then also, they were moderately successful. They're still in print in Britain.
Yes.
But I sort of stopped believing. They had a private eye, a private detective, and he had various neuroticisms and eccentricities, and I sort of put all these in at the start. And then 2 things happened. One was that I sort of slightly stopped believing in the idea that private detectives solve crimes. It's more a literary trope than an actual one, I think, in real life. And the other one was that I found that I'd sort of boxed myself in by giving him all these traits. For example, he was terrified of flying. And by the time I'd written 2 or 3, I thought, oh, damn, I can't send Duffy to Amsterdam. Well, he could go on the train, but I can't send him, anywhere serious abroad because he won't fly. and so on. So those two, conjoining motives made me decide to pension him off. I did have a fantasy of bringing him out of the crime novels as a character into a real Julian Barnes novel, and then have him, fall under a bus or something like that. So he definitely He definitely didn't exist anymore, but I decided that was a bit of a facetious idea, so I didn't do that in the end.
So it's not like, because now the crime novel is the hottest genre, so it's not that you have some time like a tickle to bring the serious, to revive the serious. And
no, I don't. It was a youthful fantasy, a youthful enjoyment. It was. I liked writing them. I liked seeing them come out. But I think also I was told by people who had written a lot of crime novels that, Ruth Rendell, for example. I don't know if she's known in Israel, but she was a great one of the very best crime novels. It took her something like 8 or 9 or 10 novels writing about the same character, central character, and then suddenly it took off. And I thought, oh, I've written 3. I've written 4 now. Am I really going to have to write another 6 to find out if it will fly or not? And I thought, no, I'll get on with something. I'll get on with something under my own name. Yes.
Definitely. And speaking of, we also have to, I'd like to address the cinematic adaptation of your book. For example, a sense of an ending. The cinematic adaptation ended in a sense of possible redemption, I would say.
Yes.
However, the novel itself ends with the sentence, "There is a great unrest." When I think about it, I'm not sure if any of your book ends with a hint of a certain redemption.
I'm glad you brought the word up. I deeply distrust the notion of redemption. I think it's mainly a religious concept which has been transferred into the cinematic industry. I mean, movies love redemption, and books on the whole, which I think are closer to life, don't. Well, some do, but on the whole not. It's a sort of, it's a neatness, it's a sentimentality, it's saying it'll all come right in the end. I mean, there's in the film of The Sense of an Ending, which is made by a very good director called Ritesh Batra. All of a sudden there's a baby theme, and the main character's daughter is going to have a baby, and there's lots of staff going to hospital, going to antenatal clinics, and then it ends with a sort of the family, the parents, who are absolutely split up in the novel, are sort of there again with their daughter and the child, and walking out of the hospital, holding the child in a little cot or whatever. In terms of how I envisaged the characters in the novel, it's kind of preposterous. And yet, because actors are so good at their jobs, they are extraordinary actors, I think.
Yes, they are.
They obliged you to believe that this was the case, this was the end of the story.
Definitely, you embrace it.
And yes, I mean, I just sat there. It also had a very good scriptwriter, I remember, a guy called Nick Payne. But at a certain point, money comes into it, you see, and money and producers. And they'll say, I think we need a little bit of a smile there. Can you give us help? Or he's a very grumpy character. Do you think you can have a little scene where he's less grumpy? All this sort of stuff. And my attitude to film adaptations has always been, you meet the people involved, you trust them, you take the money, and then you just let them get on with it. I'm not one of those who wants to. I mean, the 2 films that were made here of my work, I did go on the set just to have a look 1 or 2 days with each of them. But I don't want to sit on the director's shoulders or the producer's shoulders. I'm happy to read a script, but it's a different medium. It's a different medium altogether. And if I wanted to write Sense of an Ending as a movie script, I would have done so. And so I tend to say to the writers, you know, here's my book, throw it against the wall, see all the pieces fall down, and then put them together in a way that works in a movie. And the best ones do that. Though again, it's you know, it makes me greatly relieved that I, as a writer, write my own books and I decide what happens at the ending, and no one comes in and says, "Can you give us a baby, please? We'd really like a baby at the end of the book." No one's ever said that to me. No one's ever tried to say that to me. Or maybe I'll write a novel called "There's a Baby at the End." We'll see. We'll see.
So then I have to ask, well, I read that TV arrived to your house when you were about 10 years old.
Yes. Yes.
And together with the fact that you and your parents and brother were all very dedicated readers, and you grew up surrounded with books and comics and magazines. Yes. So I'm interested to know, how does the fact that you were with no screen and surrounded with such a tradition of loving books and admiring reading has affected you as a reader and a writer?
Well, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. That's how it was back in the day. The television screen came, and it looked like a cocktail cabinet. My parents bought it secondhand in an auction sale, because in those days there were always sort of house clearance auction sales and things like that. And it had a walnut case, and it had double doors which opened. And then we closed them at night after we'd stopped watching television. And of course, it seemed a miraculous instrument. But I'm probably an example of the last generation which grew up in a way that television only came in at a certain point. After and up till then, all your knowledge, the firing of your imagination, all your notion of what truth and humor are, had come from the pages of a book or a newspaper or a children's comic. And I think it's hard to know. I think that must have influenced me in some way. And then, of course, there's the change of the generation which had been brought up having television from the very beginning. And then at a certain point, tablets and iPhones and social media and stuff like that start, which is another, generational change. And of course, I have an iPhone, but I certainly don't do Instagram, WhatsApp, and stuff like that. I just use it as what do I use it for? I don't know. I use it. I use it to send photographs and text messages. Yes, that's true. But I'm a prose person. Yes, essentially.
I read somewhere that if you don't write for several days, you become grumpy. So yeah. I have to ask, what are you working on right now? If your new book is coming out, you're probably already working on something new.
I'm not. I wish I could say boastfully or lyingly that yes, I've got this really good idea, but I haven't. I'm not worried by it. I do. You see, I do journalism as well. I've always done. I was the London correspondent of New York for 5 years, for example, and I write book reviews and articles, and I like that side of it. I like to keep that going, and so when I finished a book and don't want to move on to the next one, I tend to do, you know, book reviewing and things like that, which I really enjoy. You know, you write something intensely over a few weeks, and then it comes out, people react to it. Whereas, you know, this novel that's just coming out, I delivered it 10 months ago, something like that. 10 or 11 months ago. And it's quite different. And I realized that, you know, I'm just about to start all the promotional activities on it. I think I'd better reread it, you know, because there might be a moment when I find myself saying to an interview, can you remind me what's the main character called? Is he Neil or is he Norman?
What did you do?
That would be very embarrassing. So I tend to sort of over prepare when I have a book coming out. And and other things have been in my brain in the meantime. Yes. Wow.
So many things are happening. So well, it's all very exciting, and it was such a great pleasure talking to you. I really thank you so much for your time, and again, congratulations for the new book. I heard it's gonna go out in 2 colors, so I hope to get the blue one.
Let me show you it. Let me show you it. Now, I'm going to hold it up, and
oh wow, it's right? Beautiful.
Now,
wow, and I love it.
Also, you see what those 2 colors are? They're the flag of Ukraine.
Definitely.
I mean, pure chance, but I'm going to cash in.
Pure chance, no. But great decision, and they also complete each other beautifully.
Yes.
So thank you so much. It was really enjoyable and fun, and of course many thanks to Mishkanot Shananim and the Jerusalem International Book Forum.
Yes,
and good luck with the book. I'm waiting anxiously to read it.
Thank you very much. It's very nice talking to you.
I enjoyed. Thank you. Have a great afternoon. Have a great Friday.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.